Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ariana. Today I'm going to recommend 7 spooky books you should read this October. The first book I want to recommend is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This book is about a girl named Jess who's recently left her job under less than ideal circumstances, and basically she asks to go stay with her brother Ben, who lives in Paris, while she gets back on her feet. And so he agrees, and she travels all the way out there, and she's immediately taken aback by how nice and fancy his apartment building seems to be and how beautiful everything is. But when she gets inside of Ben's apartment, she realizes Ben is not there. And so she immediately starts to ask around the apartment and ask all of Ben's neighbors where they think he is and if they've seen him. But she quickly finds out that there's a lot of secrets and dishonesty amongst Ben's neighbors and that they aren't being forthcoming with her, and there's definitely something that they're hiding. This is an amazing murder mystery book. There's multiple points throughout the book where you feel like you're on the precipice of like finding something out, and it just made this book such a page turner for me. Like, I feel like sometimes murder mysteries can be a little bit slow to start off, but I really felt like Lucy Foley just like threw you right into like what's going on in the story. Essentially, this is just like an amazing murder mystery if you're interested in reading one. The next book I want to recommend is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. This book is about a girl named Millie who has a secret past, and her past makes it really difficult for her to find jobs. And so she ends up getting this job for the Winchesters as a live-in nanny and housekeeper. So you have Andrew Winchester, who's the dad, and Nina Winchester, who is his wife, and then they have one kid together. And quickly you realize that Nina Winchester is like an extremely difficult person to work for, and Millie really struggles to keep her cool at this job, but she can't leave because she has like nowhere else to go and she's broke, and she struggles to comply with Nina Winchester's requests. Nina's constantly contradicting herself, telling Millie to do something and then claiming she never said to do that, and it leads to a lot of tension that all boils up throughout the story. This is literally the best thriller I've ever read. If you're looking for a book where you legitimately want to be scared while you're reading this, I recommend The Housemaid. So the next book I recommend is Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. H.D. Carlton actually wrote Haunting Adeline, which is super popular on like Book Talk and BookTube, but I actually really love this standalone romance from her. This book is about a girl named Sawyer who commits identity theft because she's on the run from something. And you go most of the book not knowing like what she's running from, but she has had like a very difficult past. She goes from town to town like stealing identities and living in such a way to not get caught until she runs into Enzo, who is the male main character of this book. And what ends up happening is that Sawyer and Enzo have like a one-night stand. She realizes that she has run the course of like her last identity. She needs a new identity to like continue to survive. She ends up stealing Enzo's identity, and eventually Enzo finds her. And when he finds her, he pretends that he doesn't know that she stole his identity and claims that he just wants to like see her again and hang out again. So they end up on this boat. After a horrible storm, the boat becomes shipwrecked, and they have to live with this like creepy old man for the rest of the month because where they are, this island is like really secluded, and essentially like people only come to like drop off supplies on the island like once a month, the old man says. And so they're just gonna have to wait until like the next shipment of stuff comes in order to get off the island. And so there's just like a lot of tension between Enzo and Sawyer. Obviously, he just stole from him. And the really interesting thing about this book that I didn't know before going into, that I actually loved, was that there's a subplot of like mystery and thriller here. The old man basically claims that the house is, or the lighthouse that they live in, is haunted by ghosts of like people who have been shipwrecked in the past and have not survived. And the mystery of this ends up being like one of my favorite parts of this book. It's so good. It adds like a whole nother dimension to the story. So it's like a dark romance with a subplot of mystery slash thriller. And it's just like a really, really good read. I was so creeped out at certain parts of this book. It's a really good spooky book to read this time of the year if you're wanting to kind of get into the dark romance genre, but please read the trigger warnings in the beginning of this book. If this is like something that you think you can handle, this is like a really good dark romance that I would definitely recommend. The next book I'm going to recommend is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and I think that everyone's heard about this book before, and I've also talked about it on my channel, so I'm not going to talk about it for too long, but this is a really good YA murder mystery. In A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Pip is a senior in high school and she's looking for a topic for her capstone project. And essentially what she decides to do is reinvestigate this murder that occurred in her town. And so the murder was of a girl named Andy Bell. And this happened a couple years ago. In this small town, everyone thinks that Andy Bell was killed by her boyfriend, Sal Singh, who then killed himself. And basically, this story kind of never sits right with Pip. She just feels like the investigation, everything that went into it doesn't make sense. The conclusions don't make sense. And so for her senior capstone project, she decides to reinvestigate it by interviewing like the people in town. I loved reading it. There's a good amount of suspense at the end as Pip's like getting closer and closer to finding answers. People are trying to stop her and it scares her, but it also just motivates her to dig deeper because she knows she's getting closer. So I highly recommend this if you haven't already read it. The next book I would recommend is a YA murder mystery called One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. This is one of my favorite YA mysteries I've ever read. Basically, this is about 5 students. There's Bronwyn, Addie, Nate, Cooper, and Simon, and they all go into detention on one Monday, but Simon never walks out of detention. Basically, Simon had planned to post reveals about all of the other students' secrets, and it was set to be posted on Tuesday. So immediately, all the other students that were with Simon in detention become suspects in his murder right after investigators determined that Simon's death was not an accident. And all of the students are really motivated to figure out who did this because they don't want their own secret to be like exposed through the investigation. This is like an amazing murder mystery. You get multiple points of view of the students. You have people like turning against each other, people questioning everything that they've like known about themselves, about the people around them, and this is just like a really great take on like a murder mystery. The next book I want to recommend is the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. I kind of feel weird recommending this book because it's very graphic. A lot of what happens is like really tough to read, so please check their trigger warnings. But that being said, this is a really excellent book. I've never read anything quite like this. This is about a girl named Lana who's actually a serial killer, and she falls in love with an FBI investigator named Logan who's currently looking into her case. Lana's trying to get revenge for some things that have happened in her past, and Logan is actively trying to stop Lana, not knowing that it's Lana who's like doing these things. If you like watching crime shows like Criminal Minds, Law and Order, you're really gonna like this book. I binged this book. Like, this is basically, there are books 1 through 5 like in this collection. Like, this is the hard copy, but it's basically a collection of like really short little novels, and I read all 5 of these like in like a day and a half. Like, I don't think it's not super long, but it's just like really well thought out. The plot, the plan, like the development of like the story. So if you're a fan of like true crime, if like those are things that you watch, I think that you'll really like this book. But please read the trigger warnings before you read it. But if this is something you think you can handle, this is like a really amazing like spooky serial killer slasher type book. The last book I recommend is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. And this is about a girl who was recently widowed. Her name is Casey Fletcher, and they have this like family house in Vermont, and essentially she goes up to this cabin, her family's cabin in Vermont, because she needs to like get her mind off of everything that's happened. While she's there, she comes into contact with the neighbors who own the house across the lake, and their names are Tom and Catherine. Essentially, one day, Catherine and Casey's lives collide when Casey saves Catherine from drowning. After, they're so grateful that Casey saved Catherine from drowning that they all have like this get together, and she just gets this feeling. Casey just gets this feeling that there's something like off about Catherine and Tom's marriage. She starts to watch them through her binoculars like every single night, because Tom and Catherine's house is like built out of glass in the front, and so Casey can essentially see everything they're doing through her binoculars, which I know sounds super creepy, and it is super creepy. But then so you see Casey like start to basically get obsessed with watching them. And then one day, Catherine just goes missing and nobody knows where she is. Nobody knows where she went. And Casey kind of like takes it upon herself to figure out like what happened to Catherine. And so she starts to like investigate and ask around and like push the boundaries of maybe even like sanity to get to the bottom of like what's happened. This is just like a really good thriller book. If you're looking for a really good suspenseful thriller and you're not really interested in like murder mystery, serial killer type vibes, but instead you're more interested in like ghost stories and that's kind of more your thing, I would definitely recommend this book. So those are all of the spooky books that I recommend you read in October. I feel like this list kind of has a little bit of something for everyone. There's YA, murder mystery, there's adult mysteries, there's dark romance, and there's like thrillers. I think that everyone can find like a little bit of something that they're interested in with this list. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!